Six-storey wood frame construction becomes law here May 1st, I think. Big fire over the weekend. Is there any lingering doubts in your mind, or is this a step we need to take?
I think it is a step we need to take, but remember, it has to be a step we need to take with safety paramount. Remember, the issue over the weekend was that this was building under construction. There were no standpipes, there were no sprinkler systems installed yet, as I understand it. So it's very difficult to draw conclusions from that 4-story building and what 6-story wood, when it's done, would actually look like.
But the dangers of getting it up there, I guess the higher it is, the harder it is to fight.
Well, we've had a number of condo fires in Calgary over time, once a decade or so. We also had a number of house fires over time. So what we have to do is make sure every building is obviously built to code, but also has the highest potential of safety possible.
Final affordability, a big part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. 6-story wood is certainly cheaper to build, and we're looking at a number of mechanisms to make sure that market homes remain affordable for people.
The idea of reassessing all of the open positions that the city has posted right now, do we really need to do that at this point?
I just think it's good organizational hygiene regardless, that every single time we hire somebody, we should make sure we really, really need that job. And whether it should be permanent or temporary and so on. And I think actually doing that a bit methodically across business units makes tons of sense.
Don't we do that now? Aren't all those jobs on that job board methodically assessed before they're posted?
We absolutely should do that now. And in fact, they're assessed by the time they get to the job board. But there are a number of vacancies that haven't made it to the job board. And those are the ones that this notice of motion is really looking at. We're not in a position now, thankfully, where we have to look at layoffs or even where we have to look at a hiring freeze. But it does make sense for the organization, in my opinion, to really be thoughtful on our hiring and on all of the growth that we're doing and all the expenses we have at this time.
How is that different from what's actually going on already? We heard Fielding talking about that at a strategic council meeting.
Yeah, City Manager Fielding has suggested this, and he also suggested that getting a bit of council direction to make it more systemic and more methodical is a good thing to do. So that's really what today is about. I suspect much of that work would be going on regardless.
Did you feel that Shane Holmes praise was targeted at you, or a reference to your controversies with the CEO?
I think that every council member needs to remember that they work for citizens. That they ought not to be lobbying for individual organizations, whether it's lobbying for them in terms of applications before council, or whether it's lobbying for them for this sort of recognition. That was just highly inappropriate. It doesn't matter who it is. If someone stood up and said in council, we should send a plaque to Suncor Energy, that would still be inappropriate. There are mechanisms to do that.
So the city does not.
We will send you one if you've been in business for 100 years. And that's a letter, not a plaque, by the way. So this was a very, very odd request.
Kind of an off-the-wall question. What's with all this standing up?
Oh, well, I'm just trying to be a little healthier is all. I finally discovered that my desk moves up, and, they say that sitting is the new smoking. So I actually made it through the whole morning standing, so we'll see if I make it through the afternoon.
So if other city employees want to also stand, will you buy them a raising desk?
Well, everyone, it's a funny question. In my office, it turns out that everyone who works in my office except for me has a standing desk, and I thought that my assistant did not have one. It turns out it was missing a screw. Once they put the screw in, it's a standing desk now. There are so many screws loose in the mayor's office, you have no idea.
Could I ask you, sir, your response to John Williamson's comments on the temporary Ford market?
This touched a nerve with me because that trope of those foreigners who are not white are taking jobs away from people who are white is a very deeply held trope. And I'm sure the guy didn't mean it with malice, but I know that one journalist said to me, I'm sure he doesn't have a hood in his closet. Of course he doesn't have a hood in his closet. But these small statements which lead to systemic thinking that people in that province who are not white are immediately thought of as not initially Canadian, that's actually a very big problem. It's a very, very big problem. And for someone who is a communications professional, who has been the director of communications for the Prime Minister, that's a big mistake. And you don't fix that in a 140-character tweet. I'd like to hear a lot more from Mr. Williamson on what he was thinking, what he actually meant, what he believes the status of non-white Canadian citizens is, and whether he thinks he can continue in his job if he really feels that people who are white are Canadian and people who are not white initially are not.
Can you talk a little bit about who will be the interim chief when Chief Axon?
Don't know. We'll let you know this afternoon. I understand that the Police Commission was meeting this morning, and that we will be asked to ratify that appointment at the end of our meeting today.
The legislators is starting up again tomorrow. Are you worried that with sort of their funding crunch that could affect your funding?
Well, as I've said before, I think that on the operating side, I'm not that worried. The province provides very little operating support to the city. The biggest areas where that could hit are in police services and in what we call FCS, that's Family and Community Support Services. I haven't heard any talk about either of those really being on the chopping block. On the capital side, I was very worried until Friday, but we've had some money added to the MSI on Friday, though I should tell you that our best indications from the provincial government is that is not new money. That is accelerated old money, which means it won't allow us to build anything new. It'll just maybe allow us to change our schedules a little bit, which is good. And number two is they haven't made any announcements on Green Trip, which is the transit funding. And it's very, very important to us that the Green Trip transit funding stay on its initial schedule so we can build those 7 busways.
Gotta wrap this up, guys.
I don't know if you've been asked this before, but just wondering what you thought of the Premier Prentice's comments last week about Albertans being responsible for the financial situation.
Surprisingly, you are the first person to ask me about that.
We have to go.
Have you looked at the mirror lately?
When was the last time you looked at yourself as a
Should you apologize?
What do you see?
I really appreciate the Premier's suggestion that we have to get out of this together and that Albertans have to take a side in this. However, I think it's extremely important that in deciding how we're moving forward, that we don't unduly put the onus on fixing the financial situation on those who are the most vulnerable. So, in fact, this is the time for us to redouble our efforts on poverty reduction. It's time for us to ensure that we're not lifting the tuition cap in post-secondary at the exact moment that people are losing their jobs and should be going back to school. It's very, very important for us to ensure that as we fix the revenue and the cost issues within the provincial budget, that we do so in a way that is equitable but does not put an undue burden on those who are the most vulnerable. As for whose fault this is, it's really not a productive conversation to have. The question is, what do we do now?